Why avoidants can't escape the bond they had with the super empath. You might think you've moved on, that you've built walls high enough to keep anyone out. But the truth is, some bonds don't just vanish, especially the one you had with someone who felt every corner of your soul, a super empath. And no matter how far you run, part of you will always feel their echo. Avoidants often pride themselves on their independence, on their ability to detach. They move quickly, mask their feelings, and believe freedom lies in cutting ties. But with a super empath, the rules are different. This isn't just about love or heartbreak. It's about connection on a level that goes deeper than logic. You see, a super empath doesn't just touch your life. They leave an imprint on your very essence. They see you, even the parts you hide from yourself. And no matter how skilled an avoidant is at creating distance, no amount of walls or distractions can erase the bond forged in truth and vulnerability. It's uncomfortable. It's raw. But it's also powerful because it reminds you that connection, real connection, isn't something you can run from. It lingers, quietly shaping your choices, your awareness, your growth. And eventually, even the most avoidant of hearts must face it, understand it, and respect it. Avoidants often pride themselves on their independence, on their ability to detach from emotional entanglements, and on the belief that freedom lies in creating distance. They tell themselves that they are self-sufficient, that they don't need anyone else to feel complete, and that their heart is theirs to guard above all else. At first glance, this seems like strength. To an outsider, it might even appear enviable. After all, who wouldn't want someone who seems untouchable, someone who doesn't crumble under the weight of emotion or dependency? But the truth is far more nuanced, far more complex. The avoidance of emotional intimacy doesn't erase the connections that are formed at a deeper, almost imperceptible level. In fact, it often masks the very thing that can't be erased, the bond with someone who truly sees you. When an avoidant meets a super empath, there is a subtle, almost magnetic pull. It's not just attraction, it's recognition. The super empath senses things that the avoidant isn't even aware of themselves. They see through the walls, through the calculated detachment, and they understand the fears that drive the avoidant. And while the avoidant may feel compelled to pull away, to retreat into their safe, controlled solitude, the connection has already been established on a level that is far deeper than words or gestures. This is why the notion of escaping is such a dangerous illusion. The avoidant may physically remove themselves, change routines, or even refuse communication, but the emotional imprint remains. It's quiet at first, like a shadow that moves at the edge of awareness. It manifests in fleeting thoughts, in unexpected moments of vulnerability, in dreams that make them question their supposed immunity to attachment. The illusion of escape relies on the belief that distance equals freedom, but in reality, it only creates a false sense of security. Avoidants can convince themselves that they are no longer affected by the bond, that they have mastered detachment, but the mind and heart operate independently of conscious control. Memories resurface unbidden, subtle triggers spark old emotions. A song, a smell, or even a brief encounter with someone reminiscent of the super empath can awaken feelings the avoidant thought were long buried. And it's not just about longing or missing someone. It's about the recognition that this bond touched something essential in their own psyche. They may avoid it, fight it, or rationalize it, but the connection has planted a seed that continues to grow in ways they cannot fully suppress. Avoidants often believe that they are choosing freedom by withdrawing, but the reality is that the bond with a super empath does not conform to the rules of avoidance. Emotional connections are not bound by proximity, and some bonds are too profound to be broken by distance or silence. The super empath's impact is not contingent on the avoidant's willingness to reciprocate. It exists whether they acknowledge it or not. This is what makes the avoidant's belief in escape so tragically flawed. They may appear to move on, to find temporary relief in distraction or new routines, but underneath, the bond persists, quietly asserting itself in subtle ways. The avoidant may not be ready to face it, but the connection waits patiently, unmoved by their attempts at evasion. The struggle then is not external, it is internal. Avoidants fight against their own emotional truth. They have learned to value independence and self-protection, often equating attachment with weakness. They may even frame their avoidance as wisdom, as a conscious decision to preserve themselves. But the bond with a super empath challenges that narrative. It reveals the limitations of avoidance, exposing the vulnerability they have worked so hard to suppress. The illusion of escape is seductive because it feels like control, but it is ultimately a temporary mirage. The more an avoidant resists, the more persistent the bond becomes, not because of the super empath's effort or persistence, but because of the nature of deep emotional recognition itself. Even in the absence of interaction, the avoidant's mind continues to process the bond. They analyze past moments, replay conversations, and question their own reactions. This mental engagement happens without conscious permission, and it is a testament to the indelible impact of someone who truly understood them. Avoidants may believe that detachment will allow them to erase the memory, to sever the emotional link, but that is impossible. The bond is not just a series of shared experiences, it is a connection that has penetrated the avoidant's core, touching layers of identity and emotion that were previously inaccessible. The illusion of escape is therefore a comforting lie, one that allows avoidance to feel justified, even as it fails to change the underlying reality of the connection. A super empath is not just someone who listens or shows compassion in the ordinary sense. They possess an extraordinary capacity to feel, to sense, and to respond to the emotional currents that others try to hide, sometimes even from themselves. With a super empath connection goes far beyond superficial conversation or fleeting affection. They perceive subtleties that most people miss. The tiniest shift in tone, the micro-expressions that reveal fear or longing, the unspoken tension that others might shrug off. They don't just interact with you on a surface level. They engage with the layers beneath, the parts of you that have been carefully shielded from the world. For an avoidant who has spent years cultivating a sense of emotional invisibility, this can be simultaneously captivating and terrifying. The power of a super empath lies in their ability to see without judgment. They recognize not only your strengths, but also your vulnerabilities, and they do so in a way that feels safe rather than invasive. They have an almost uncanny skill in mirroring emotions, reflecting back the feelings that an avoidant might have long denied even to themselves. This reflection is not accusatory, it is illuminating. It forces the avoidant to confront truths they may have buried or ignored, the ways they push people away, the fears that drive their distance, and the yearning they might not even acknowledge. And yet, this confrontation is gentle, subtle, almost effortless. The super empath doesn't demand confessions. They create a space where honesty naturally emerges. One of the most remarkable aspects of a super empath is their ability to resonate with the avoidant's internal state without forcing a reaction. They sense discomfort without escalating it. They notice walls without crashing into them, and they understand boundaries without being deterred. This is why the bond feels so inescapable. It's not because of manipulation or insistence. It's because the super empath operates on a wavelength that bypasses resistance entirely. They inhabit a space where connection occurs naturally, without coercion, and this makes it profoundly difficult. For an avoidant to fully disengage, the avoidant may believe they're in control, but in reality, they are interacting with someone who perceives far more than they let on and who can respond in ways that are subtle, persistent, and transformative. A super empath's power also lies in their consistency. While others may retreat when faced with emotional walls, a super empath remains attuned, present, and steady. They do not react impulsively to avoidance with frustration or pressure. Instead, they maintain a subtle gravitational pull. This stability creates an emotional counterpoint to the avoidant's push for distance. The avoidant may attempt to run, but the empath's presence, even when not actively imposed, resonates in a way that cannot be ignored. It creates an unspoken dialogue that operates below the level of conscious thought, shaping how the avoidant thinks, feels, and responds over time. Another dimension of a super empath's influence is their ability to make the avoidant feel understood without needing to explain themselves fully. Avoidants are skilled at hiding, at constructing layers of deflection and indifference. But with a super empath, the avoidant discovers that words are often unnecessary, a look, a tone, or even a shared silence communicates volumes. This nonverbal understanding can be disarming. The avoidant realizes that someone has penetrated their carefully constructed defenses, not through force, but through perception, patience, and emotional intelligence. It is a kind of intimacy that avoids the usual triggers of fear or vulnerability, yet it is deeper and more enduring than anything they have experienced before. Super empaths also have a way of subtly guiding avoidance toward emotional growth. They reflect behaviors back, highlight patterns, and offer insights without overtly instructing or demanding change. Their power is in the quiet revealer. The avoidant notices shifts in themselves, recognizes old tendencies, and begins to see the consequences of avoidance. It is not about coercion, it is about illumination, and because it comes from someone who truly understands them, the impact is far more profound than advice from a friend, a therapist, or a casual acquaintance. The avoidant cannot simply dismiss it because it resonates with an inner truth they have long denied. Ultimately, the power of a super empath is both subtle and unyielding. They do not chase, they do not force, they do not break down walls with aggression. Instead, they connect in a way that bypasses resistance entirely, leaving an imprint that lingers long after physical or verbal interaction has ended. The avoidant may believe they are untouchable, that they have mastered emotional detachment, but the super empath operates on a level that makes such mastery impossible. Connection, when it is this deep and intuitive, is not something that can be willed away. It exists in the very fabric of the avoidant's emotional and psychological landscape, shaping thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, even in the absence of conscious acknowledgement. Even after an avoidant has walked away, after they have distanced themselves physically, emotionally, and mentally, the bond with a super empath continues to resonate. It lingers not because of obligation or attachment in the traditional sense, but because it imprinted itself on a level that avoidance cannot erase. This is what makes the connection so profoundly persistent. It exists independently of presence, of effort, or even conscious acknowledgement. The avoidant may believe that absence equates to freedom, that removing themselves from the relationship will sever all ties, but the truth is far more subtle. Emotional bonds, when forged with someone who understands you completely, are not bound by geograph, logic, or even intention. They continue to echo, silently influencing thought patterns, moods, and even unconscious behaviors. The persistent echo manifests in ways that are often invisible at first. A memory, unbidden, surfaces in the middle of the day, triggered by a fleeting smell, a familiar gesture, or a phrase that echoes a shared conversation. The avoidant may shake it off, rationalize it, or suppress it, but the memory carries weight. It is not nostalgia or longing in its simplest form. It is the recognition that the connection fundamentally altered them. Even when the mind insists on moving forward, the emotional resonance remains, gently nudging, quietly reminding. Avoidants often pride themselves on their ability to compartmentalize, to erect barriers between the past and present. But the echo bypasses these walls. It exists in layers that avoidance cannot reach, subtle yet persistent, quietly shaping responses and decisions without permission. This echo is reinforced by the super empath's unique ability to influence without confrontation. Unlike relationships where lingering feelings are tied to unresolved conflict or neediness, the super empath's imprint is different. It is a reflection of being truly seen, truly understood. Avoidants are often masters at hiding their vulnerabilities, but the super empath touches those hidden parts. Because of this, the avoidant cannot simply dismiss the bond as irrelevant or meaningless. It remains in their consciousness in ways that are not always comfortable but are undeniably real. Even in moments of denial, the echo works quietly, a subtle undercurrent that affects how they relate to themselves and others. The persistence of this connection also affects the avoidant's future relationships. They may meet new people, engage in new connections, or even attempt to recreate the emotional safety they believe they can manage. But echoes of the super empath linger, creating a subconscious benchmark that is difficult to replicate. New relationships may feel incomplete or unsatisfying, not because the avoidant is incapable of love, but because they have experienced a level of understanding and resonance that is rare and difficult to match. The super empath's impact is not contingent on ongoing interaction. It has already become part of the avoidant's emotional architecture, subtly shaping their expectations, their defenses, and their capacity for intimacy. Avoidants often mistake their ability to move forward for mastery over the past, but the echo demonstrates otherwise. It exists in small, almost imperceptible ways. A fleeting pang of guilt, a sudden clarity about past behavior, an involuntary reflection on choices made. These manifestations are not dramatic, but they are constant. They are reminders that some bonds are formed at the level of identity and perception, not merely circumstance. The avoidant may resist, rationalize, or distract themselves, but the connection continues to work beneath the surface, quietly challenging assumptions and prompting introspection. What makes the echo so unyielding is that it is not just about memory or sentiment. It is about emotional imprint. The super empath engages with the avoidant in ways that expose hidden truths and unacknowledged emotions. These interactions leave a mark that avoidance cannot erase because it is fundamentally tied to the avoidant's self-awareness. Even attempts at denial or suppression cannot undo the imprint. The avoidant's mind and heart have internalized aspects of the connection. It becomes a lens through which they interpret future experiences, a subtle guide that shapes emotional responses even when they believe they are acting independently. The persistent echo also reinforces the avoidant's internal conflict. On the surface, they may feel relief from distance, convinced they have regained control. Yet beneath this, the echo lingers, a quiet reminder of vulnerability, connection, and emotional depth that cannot be entirely ignored. It forces awareness of what they have left behind, not in a manipulative sense, but as a natural consequence of being deeply known. The avoidant may attempt to numb, distract, or rationalize, but the resonance persists, demonstrating that some bonds are fundamentally indelible. Ultimately, the echo is a testament to the super empath's impact. It is proof that connection cannot be defined solely by presence or absence, by effort or avoidance. It persists in thought, in feeling, in the subtle ways that shape who the avoidant is long after they believe they have escaped. It is quiet, persistent, and undeniable. A reminder that being truly seen leaves an imprint that no avoidance can completely erase. Avoidants often think of resistance as a shield, as a way to protect themselves from vulnerability, from the unpredictability of emotional exposure. They believe that by keeping distance, by controlling the pace of intimacy, they are preserving themselves. And in many ways, avoidance does feel like protection, a carefully honed skill developed over years of learning how to navigate relationships without losing autonomy. But what they often fail to realize is that resistance does not erase connection, it shapes it. And when an avoidant encounters a super empath, their resistance becomes less a wall and more a mirror, reflecting aspects of themselves they have long avoided facing. The super empath does not push in a conventional way. They do not confront avoidance with force, guilt, or manipulation. Instead, they simply remain attuned, present, and responsive, creating a space where truth naturally arises. For an avoidant, this is both unsettling and transformative. The resistance that once felt like freedom now feels like a barrier to something they cannot fully understand. They may fight against it, rationalize it, or even attempt to convince themselves that they are indifferent. But beneath the surface, the super empath's presence highlights contradictions within them, the yearning for connection, the fear of exposure, and the tension between independence and intimacy. This tension is fertile ground for growth, even if the avoidant does not initially recognize it as such. Growth through resistance is subtle. It is not about sudden epiphanies or dramatic breakthroughs. Rather, it emerges in moments of quiet reflection, in the awareness that certain feelings cannot be dismissed or suppressed indefinitely. The avoidant begins to notice patterns. The ways they pull away, the emotional triggers that provoke fear, the defense mechanisms that no longer serve them. These realizations can be uncomfortable, even painful, because they challenge deeply ingrained beliefs about self-sufficiency and control. Yet they are necessary. Resistance forces the avoidant to confront these truths, not through coercion, but through the gentle insistence of someone who sees them fully. In essence, the super empath's impact is both mirror and catalyst, reflecting back what the avoidant has hidden and encouraging a kind of self-awareness that avoidance alone could never achieve. This growth is often misunderstood by the avoidant. They may interpret it as frustration, confusion, or even a threat to their autonomy. But in reality, it is a form of emotional education, a way of learning that intimacy does not have to be destructive, that vulnerability does not equal weakness. The super empath provides a safe context in which the avoidant can experiment with openness without losing themselves. Each interaction becomes a lesson, a subtle recalibration of what it means to connect without compromising boundaries. Over time, this repeated engagement, even when resisted, lays the groundwork for a deeper understanding of self and others. Another aspect of growth through resistance is the development of emotional resilience. Avoidants are often skilled at compartmentalizing and suppressing feelings, but this avoidance can create blind spots in their emotional awareness. By encountering someone who consistently responds to their hidden layers, they are forced to confront these blind spots. The process is not always linear. There are setbacks, moments of withdrawal, and even denial. But with each cycle of engagement, the avoidant learns to tolerate emotional intensity, to recognize their own needs, and to navigate connection with greater subtlety. Resistance, in this sense, is not wasted energy. It is the friction necessary for growth, the push and pull dynamic so characteristic of avoidant super empath interactions functions like a refining process, slowly expanding the avoidant's capacity for self-awareness and emotional maturity. The super empath's influence also teaches the avoidant to reconsider the nature of control. Avoidants often equate detachment with power, believing that the ability to withdraw at will is the ultimate form of self-mastery. Yet the presence of someone who sees through avoidance undermines this illusion. The avoidant begins to realize that true control is not about suppression or distance, but about understanding and integrating their emotional experiences. Resistance becomes a teacher, showing them that connection does not diminish autonomy. It can coexist with it, enriching life in ways that avoidance alone cannot provide. Even when the avoidant initially resists, growth occurs in imperceptible ways. Thoughts shift, perspectives broaden, and emotional responses become more nuanced. What may feel like stagnation or avoidance to the outside observer is actually a slow, deliberate recalibration of internal systems. The super empath's consistent presence, their understanding, and their ability to reflect back hidden truths function as catalysts for transformation. Resistance, in this context, is not a failure. It is part of the process, an essential component of the journey toward greater self-awareness, emotional literacy, and relational depth. Ultimately, resistance becomes the medium through which growth is achieved. Avoidants learn that the very mechanisms they relied on for protection are also the ones that limit their evolution. Encountering a super empath challenges these mechanisms gently but persistently, forcing a confrontation with truths that have long been denied. The friction, tension, and discomfort that arise are not obstacles. They are indicators of progress. Even in the midst of resistance, growth is happening quietly, profoundly, and irrevocably. No matter how skillful an avoidant may be at detachment, there comes a point when the bond with a super empath demands acknowledgement. Avoidants often pride themselves on their independence, on their ability to create emotional distance, on the belief that they can move through life untethered by deep connection. They may believe that ignoring, rationalizing, or suppressing the influence of someone who truly understands them is sufficient to escape the past. But the reality is far more intricate. The connection forged with a super empath is not merely a relationship. It is a mirror, a reflection of truths that cannot remain hidden indefinitely. Eventually, even the most practiced avoidant must confront the imprint left behind, whether they want to or not. This recognition is not always dramatic or sudden. It rarely arrives in the form of an epiphany or confession. Instead, it emerges quietly through subtle shifts in thought, through patterns that the avoidant can no longer ignore, and through moments of unexpected introspection. It appears when they notice their own reactions, why certain situations trigger unease, why specific words carry weight, or why attempts at detachment fail to bring the peace they anticipated. The avoidant may initially resist noticing these patterns, telling themselves that it is coincidence, overreaction, or mere nostalgia. But over time, the evidence accumulates and the bond's influence becomes impossible to deny. The super empath's presence, even in absence, leaves traces that resurface in ways the avoidant cannot fully control. Inevitable recognition also comes from the depth of understanding the super empath has offered. Unlike casual relationships or fleeting encounters, a connection with a super empath is built on an extraordinary capacity to perceive hidden layers, to notice subtleties, and to respond in ways that validate unspoken emotions. Avoidants, who are accustomed to masking their vulnerabilities, are forced to face the truth of their own emotional landscape. The super empath sees the parts of themselves that they have long kept secret, the fears, the desires, the contradictions, and the loneliness beneath the armor of detachment. When someone has seen you in this way, the recognition of their impact becomes unavoidable. You may attempt to ignore it, rationalize it, or distance yourself further, but the imprint remains, quietly demanding acknowledgement. Another factor in this inevitable recognition is the super empath's subtle but persistent influence. They do not need to pursue or coerce the avoidant. The resonance they create is enough to leave a lasting impression. Avoidants may believe they are untouchable, that emotional walls or avoidance strategies have rendered them immune to connection, but the super empath operates on a level that bypasses conscious resistance. Through their patience, empathy, and understanding, they embed a presence that becomes intertwined with the avoidant's sense of self. Over time, the avoidant cannot escape the awareness that their life, their emotions, and their perspective have been shaped by someone who truly understood them. Recognition, in this sense, is not optional. It is a natural outcome of deep emotional resonance. The process of recognition also forces avoidants to confront their own patterns of behavior. It highlights the ways in which avoidance has served both as protection and as limitation. They begin to see how their resistance to intimacy, their insistence on control, and their habitual withdrawal have affected not only their relationship with the super empath, but also their broader capacity for connection. The super empath's influence illuminates blind spots that avoidance alone cannot address, revealing how deeply interconnected emotional awareness and personal growth truly are. Even if the avoidant initially resists or denies this awareness, it persists, surfacing in reflections, regrets, and reconsiderations of past choices. Inevitable recognition is also shaped by the enduring nature of the bond itself. Unlike fleeting attractions or casual connections, the relationship with a super empath leaves an emotional and psychological imprint that persists long after separation. Memories, insights, and emotional cues resurface in ways that cannot be fully suppressed. Avoidants may encounter these echoes unexpectedly, in dreams, in encounters with others, or in moments of introspection. Each resurgence is a reminder of what was experienced and of the truth that some connections are indelible. No amount of rationalization, distraction, or distance can fully erase the imprint of someone who truly understood you at the deepest level. Ultimately, the inevitability of recognition is a testament to the profound impact of a super empath. They operate in ways that bypass resistance, penetrate defenses, and reveal truths that avoidance cannot obscure. The avoidant may resist, distract, or rationalize for a time, but the influence remains, quietly asserting itself through reflection, emotional resonance, and subtle behavioral patterns. The bond cannot be undone, erased, or ignored indefinitely. Recognition is not merely a possibility, it is the natural outcome of a connection that has touched the avoidance core, leaving a mark that shapes their understanding of themselves, of intimacy, and of what it means to be truly seen. As we reflect on all of this, it becomes clear that no matter how strong we think our walls are, no matter how fiercely we try to guard our hearts, certain connections leave an indelible mark. The bond between an avoidant and a super empath is not a simple story of attachment or distance. It is a story of truth, awareness, and growth. It teaches us that avoidance may delay, but it cannot erase the deep resonance of someone who truly sees us. It reminds us that emotional connection is not a weakness to fear, but a force that shapes who we are, even when we least expect it. For the avoidance among us, it is an invitation to pause, to reflect, and to honor the lessons embedded in these relationships. For everyone listening, it is a reminder that the people who touch our hearts profoundly cannot always be contained by distance, time, or circumstance. These bonds leave echoes that inform our choices, our growth, and our capacity to connect authentically with others. So, as we move forward, let us carry this awareness with us, not as a burden, but as a gift. Let us recognize that the connections that truly matter have a way of finding us again, even when we think we have moved on. And let us remember that being seen, understood, and felt at a deep level is one of life's most powerful experiences, one that shapes us long after the encounter has ended. Thank you all for taking the time to reflect on this journey with me. Thank you for opening your hearts and minds to the subtle, transformative power of human connection. I appreciate your attention, your willingness to explore these truths, and your openness to the idea that even the most elusive bonds have meaning, impact, and purpose. May you carry this understanding into your relationships. May you honor the echoes of those who have truly seen you. And may you approach connection with both courage and curiosity. Thank you once again from the bottom of my heart for being here today. I wish you insight, growth, and the courage to embrace the connections that shape your life in ways you may only discover over time. Goodbye and take care.